委員咁啊。
Members, we have a quorum. This is the appointed time. So I call this meeting to order. Information papers issued since the last meeting. The papers are set out on the agenda. Any views on the matter? If there aren't any views, we will move on to discuss items for discussion at the next meeting. So we note the information papers issued. As for the items for discussion at the next meeting, please refer to CB bracket 11181/1819 bracket 01. And please also refer to CB bracket 11181/1819 bracket 02. Ms. Alice Mack. Chairman, last time at the meeting, I proposed a private member's bill to amend the Inland Revenue Ordinance. Is it in our plan that at the next meeting we can discuss that is within this legislative session? Why isn't it here? Well, in fact, I wrote to you already, and according to the administration's reply, indeed, we could discuss your item, but at the same time, the administration would like to discuss the review on the water supply regulations, and it is unknown whether your bill will have any charging effect. It is therefore unknown whether we could discuss it. The administration has proposed to complete the review before we discuss your bill. So let's see if you would agree. Well, as you know, I have made this proposal more than a year ago. I don't know when the government's review will be completed. This bill has been in a pipeline for a long time. At the moment, we have subdivided units, tenants being forced by their landlords to pay exorbitant utility charges. There is a great impact on the livelihood of these tenants. So at least, Chairman, I think the matter should be discussed at the panel level. I dare the government to come forward and say to us that they have no intention to do so and so, but at least there should not be an endless wait. All right, I'll forward your view to the Secretary. I hope that they would discuss it as soon as possible. As to whether the public spending is involved, I think this will be left to future discussion. So, on to the next matter. The next regular meeting is scheduled for the 17th of July 2019, Wednesday, 2:30 p.m. to 5 p.m. The administration has proposed to discuss 3 items. Ms. Alice Mack just asked whether her private member's bill will be discussed as well. Perhaps I will reflect her view to the administration. Now, the administration has proposed 3 items. The first one is the cycling track connecting Northwest NT and Northeast NT, the Samunchai extension. Second item, standards of glass windows of buildings for resisting adverse weather. And 3, flood management measures for typhoon season. These are the 3 items. Ms. Alice Mack just raised an issue. I will discuss with them in one go and see if we should include that item as well. Is there any objection? If there isn't, then let's move on to item 3 of the agenda, work of the Urban Renewal Authority. Meanwhile, let me invite the administration to come in. Please press the request to speak button if you wish to speak. We have attending today's meeting the following. As they are coming in to the room, we have Secretary for Development, Mr. Michael Wong, JP, Mr. Chow Chung Kwang, Chairman of the Urban Renewal Authority, Mr. Iriam Y. Shing, Managing Director, URA, GBSJP, and also Deputy Secretary for Development, Mr. Maurice Liu, and Ms. Jenny Choi, Principal Assistant Secretary from Development Bureau. Mr. Ben Lloyd, Executive Director, Operations of the URA. Mr. Michael Ma, Executive Director, Commercial of the URA. Mr. Daniel Ho, Director, Building Rehabilitation. Mr. Ian Wong, Director, Acquisition and Clearance, URA. Mr. Daniel Ho, Director, Building Rehabilitation, URA. And Mr. Wilfred Au, Director, Planning and Design of the URA. Thank you for coming to our meeting. Let me invite Secretary to brief us on the paper. Thank you, Chairman. I'll be very succinct, and then Mr. Chow would also elaborate on my introduction. I'm very happy to be here together with the newly appointed Chairman, Mr. Chow Chung Kong, and his team to report to members the URA's work for the past year. For the business plan and the cooperation plan for the coming year, members would wish to refer to 29 Annex B. In terms of redevelopment and rehabilitation, the URA has been making progress for the past year. The administration is delighted to know that the URA has made a lot of effort, and the URA has also partnered up with the government and launched the OBB Operation Building Bright 2.0, the Fire Safety Improvement Work Subsidy Scheme, and the Lift Modernization Subsidy Scheme. The URA has also actively taken up on the administration's suggestion to start a starter home pilot projects in Matawai Road, and also worked on redeveloping government-built housing programs units. At the moment, the URA is also taking forward a multi-pronged approach. For example, studying into more stable ways of revitalizing urban areas. As for the strategy, there is also a plan to extend the lifespan of building stock. I think the URA will continue to be visionary and forward-looking in its work, and the government will continue to work closely with the URA. Chairman, perhaps at this juncture, I'll give the floor to Mr. Chow, Chairman of the URA. Thank you, Chairman, members.
Now, I'm glad to report to you our work on 2019 to 20. Now, I have become a member of the management group, and we have learned more about the work of the URA. The URA has social responsibility. Through redevelopment, we improve the living environment, we pay compensation and make arrangements for the tenants, and we also engage in rehabilitation initiatives and engage in revitalization to improve the overall planning. So we are not a developer. The URA is not profit or driven. We embark on revitalization, redevelopment, rehabilitation, and so on. So we need to earn our revenue for 4 of the R's. Now, in order to preserve financial stability, we also try to make housing affordable. Now, the starter home scheme and other initiatives are efforts to sell at below market prices. We last year were engaged in 3 subsidy schemes to improve the lifts, fire services, and buildings for those who are needy, so as to meet the financial needs of the owners. Now, we have migrated to a district-based approach instead of a project-oriented approach. We started the Yaomong district that will be completed. That study will be completed early next year. That will speed up urban renewal, and to promote rehabilitation. We have worked on over 4,000 buildings. That's twice the number of buildings under redevelopment. And we also have engaged in new studies for rehabilitation, and we devoted more efforts into preventive rehabilitation. We will be vigilant in the use of resources to deal with the problem of urban aging. Now, we can't just rely on the URA alone. We hope that the community, LegCo, and all the stakeholders involved will help to promote the objective of urban renewal in the long term. 7 members have indicated their wish to speak. Taman Ho, Gary Fan, Cheng Shun, Tanya Chen, Fernando Cheung, Lau Kwok Fun, Alice Mack, Priscilla Leung, 4 minutes each. Mr. Taman Ho first. Now, I would like to speak on the letter from the To Kwa Wan residents affected by redevelopment in To Kwa Wan. They talked about rooftop dwellings, the reduction in living space as a result of the redevelopment. Now, I like to focus on the shops. In To Kwa Wan, there are a lot of ground floor garages. They are being driven out. Now, they cannot find new locations for the shops. These repair shops. Now, many commercial vehicles and private vehicles have to make use of these repair shops. There are over 100 such repair shops in To Kwa Wan. So I don't know if you have the figures on how many of these are affected. And the compensation is basically to the owner. So what help would you be able to offer the tenants? And for this industry, when it cannot continue in To Kwa Wan, where can they provide the service to residents and to commercial operators? Now, I will ask Mr. Wai to talk about Kowloon City, but to my knowledge, these shops are moving to Cheng Yi, and then they also reduce in number in the process. Mr. Wai? I agree there's the problem. In To Kwa Wan, there are these vehicle repair shops, and there were 6 projects, and so a number of these repair shops were affected. We try to find suitable locations for them to move to. There are 41 cases of successful acquisition, and 70% have delivered the premises. Most of them have moved, say, to Sha Tin, Tsuen Wan. Some have terminated their business. Our colleagues continue to try to resolve the moving problem for the remaining repair shops. Now, Now, we know there are a number of other vehicle repair shops in other parts of the territory, and we will try to be prepared for that. Now, did you track the progress? Now, for instance, 41, you have acquired the premises. They went to Sha Tin and Tsuen Wan. did you track down every one of them? Are they continuing? Are they continuing in the operation, but in another location? How many were cases of success? How many terminated their business? Mr. Y? It's not a tracking. We just try to assist each tenant individually. For those who moved, 2 went to North District, 1 to Sha Tin, 1 to Tsuen Wan, 8 remained in Kowloon, 6 remained in the vicinity of Kowloon City, 4 ended the business, and 1 wouldn't divulge the outcome. Now, I want to know how the URA provided assistance to them. Please provide written information. Gary Fan. Now, a future initiative is the Yau Mong study, which is in progress, and the URA has made known some points. There are 3 different densities to come up with a conceptual plan for urban redevelopment. Now, density is increased in one case, and the other 2 either maintain or reduce the density. So this will have the effect of reducing the population in the area. So I'm concerned that very often in urban renewal there isn't enough space to resettle the original residents who are affected by the renewal. So they are forced to move to other districts or areas. And the government has announced the Lantau Tomorrow initiative, and it says that the Lantau, brothers, Gaoyizhou artificial island can provide can provide residential space for a section of the part of the population. Now, are you intending to move the residents of Yau Mong district to the artificial island, which is very far away? Now, please provide the information. The Secretary? Logically, they are related. Now, when we talk about the future development of Hong Kong in the next 30 years, we need almost 1 million more units. 300,000 will be provided through redevelopment, including that in Yau Mong. So we have to relocate the residents. Now, where is the new areas for these? These are mostly in the northern New Territories, Kutong North, Fanling North, and also the artificial island. Now, the study is in progress. As I said in the opening remarks, we hope that by early 2020, after the study is completed, a policy report will be submitted to the administration. Now, for the Yau Mong study, the options are those identified by the Secretary. If there are not enough units for resettlement in the same district, so Kutong North, Fanling North, and then the Lantau artificial island. Now, in the study, in the Yau Mong study, we haven't identified, we don't have in mind the locations or geographical areas to move the residents to. We will only know after the study. Now, rent out tomorrow is one option. We are in shortage of land, so we will try to make the best use of the land in Yao Mong district, and we will make use of new residential developments as they become available. Now, for Operation Building Bright and redevelopment, we rely on URA. So the work of the URA is important. Now, we are concerned about the civil servants cooperative societies housing sites. So it's been said that maybe a couple of sites would be part of your study. So what is the progress? Now, we hope that different types of housing would be included, including subsidized housing and public rental housing. Now, in the past, private housing has mostly resulted from the redevelopment. So I hope that you would consider using the land for subsidized housing, such as PRH. Now, I will talk about the policy, and then the details will be provided by Mr. Wei. Now, we try to identify civil servants, corporate society sites which have potential for development. We try to provide incentives when the owners receive the compensation and they have to pay 2/3 of the premium to the government, then the project cannot happen very often. So for the redeveloped site, apart from buildings for sale in the market, we hope also to include a substantial amount of subsidized housing.
Mr. White. As per the policy address, the URA is tasked to identify 1 or 2 clusters of CBS sites suitable for high-density development. We reviewed 38 and we found 132 such sites were suitable for high-density development. And having considered the selection criteria, we have some 30 CBS projects. They will be developed in 2 phases as a pilot scheme. We've just completed preliminary planning. The first step is to revise the approved 18th business plan or corporate plan before we roll this out. We hope by the latter half of this year, if there is no objection from the administration, we could press ahead. Well, let me supplement. I do have expectation about developing CBS sites. I understand that we have a lot to deal with. There is, however, potential to develop these sites to increase supply in the urban area. I fully agree. Thank you. Ms. Tanya Chan. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and Secretary. I'd like to ask about preservation projects. One of the objectives of the URA is preservation, and I'm very concerned about cases such as Comic Base. When the tenancy agreement expires, it is not renewed. I understand that operation has ceased. I understand this will be retendered. I want to know about your preparation. I read some news reports, but I'd like to know more from you, because this is, after all, not the URA's expertise. Will you continue to work towards this direction about the artistic elements? Back then, we had expectation about this site. In Central, Cochrane Street, I'd like to have an update. And also the shop sign wing wall, that aged building. Can you tell me more about that? Secretary, thank you, Ms. Tanya Chan, for her questions. Well, first of all, I'd like to say this is the first time I've met Mrs. Chan here in this council again. I understand she's undergone a major operation. I wish her a speedy recovery. In terms of arts and culture, the URA will continue to play a role. As Ms. Chan may know, for various reasons, after taking over a site, for example, a site in Central, the development project cannot proceed, and rather the site is preserved for artistic or cultural purposes. Now, for comic base, I'll defer to my colleague. Well, basically, the operation ceased last year, and the operation was quite homogeneous, as we heard, over the past 5 years, whereas the community would like the site to be open for various uses by the public. At the moment, the site is open for the public and also art groups for holding events via advance booking. And in fact, recently we have had a collaboration project. 4 rooms have become standing exhibition space. And we also have the remaining space available for rent by the public. Basically, the URA has taken over the management of the site for public's benefits. You're referring to number 120 Wellington Street, Ms. Tanya Chan, when you talk about wing wall. There will be in situ conservation. The building, however, is quite dilapidated. Our collaborating partner, the developer, is engaging an expert to give advice on rehabilitation and preservation matters. Chairman, Cochrane Street, what's the situation now? Is there any chance we can dovetail this one with the Central Market? I think you're referring to the stone wall. We have given an undertaking that there will be in situ preservation of the stone wall. The developer, again, is conducting a study to look at the whole site. For the Cochrane Street project, there are 3 areas in our undertaking. 1 is the stone wall, 2 is 120 Wellington Street, and 3 is 26 ABC of Cochrane Street. And the developer is finding ways to preserve these spots and also to connect these spots with the surrounding development projects. All right, time's up, Dr. Fernando Zhang. Well, the time is so short, Chairman. There is so much we can speak on reviewing the URA's work. You started in 2011, and you have some 60 projects in the pipeline. Over 50 of them relate to redevelopment. In other words, you just break up an old district, as the chairman put it, to improve the living environment in the neighborhood. But in effect, you are driving these existing tenants away, and you pay compensation. And by developing new projects, you build larger flats, reaping a big profit. You started with a startup fund of less than $1 billion. Now it stands at $4.5 billion. You've made a profit of more than 4 times. You claim you're not profit-oriented, but you are doing exactly that. You do magic in old districts where the environmental hygiene may not be as good, where the facilities may not be as good, and you claim to be helping those people solve the problem. You claim you're not making money, but you are. How does this magic work? That is high land price policy. In other words, you are exploiting the grassroots. You know, in older buildings, the rent is lower, The operation is simpler and cheaper, but once URA barges in, this way of living is totally gone. Well, Mr. Jeremy Tam referred to the area in To Kwa Wan. What about the business chain? There are many business operations relating to vehicles, garages, spare parts, car beauty shops. You have the whole chain, the whole ecology of car-related businesses. And now they are scattered everywhere because of your effort. To you, it means nothing. But the whole business, the whole industry suffers. In the past, in older buildings, there is space for them to build a bay for repair. And now you're stifling their business. That's also a repeat of Leighton Street. You claim you're helping them. Well, in fact, the tenants have made it loud and clear, as I've heard that evening. Their experience is that although they are eligible for flat compensation, you are very harsh and they are only allocated small flats. And subdivided unit tenants are put on the back of the list. And you wait until a very late stage before you finally take possession of the units. They are forced to move out because of pests and rodent infestation, water leakage. The environmental hygiene is so poor. The whole living environment is destroyed by you. Finally, when they're all gone, you will work with the developer and you work with the housing society to reap a big profit in the name of helping Hong Kong. But in fact, you are exploiting the grassroots. You are undermining these small businesses. Are you really helping people? You've used up your time, Dr. Fernando Dojang, but I allowed the Secretary to give you a reply. This is an important point. I'd like to talk about the financial position. In the last financial year, the URA acquired a 1.2 billion profit, and the profit dropped drastically in the following year. And in fact, in Mr. Y's blog, he also explained the accumulated surplus. Apart from rising property prices, for URA projects, there is no need to pay premium. That is equivalent to $10 billion. Now, in the future, there may not be many sites left with surplus plot ratio. And according to Mr. Y, the cash outlay may amount to $200–300 billion. Now, if we take a look at the situation, some ground floor business operators may have very good businesses, whereas for upstairs tenants, or landlords, very often they may be outside the URA selected site and they want to be included as well. Because for these aged buildings, it is really inconvenient for elderly tenants to move about. So we'd like to improve the living environment of those living in aged buildings. And indeed, the URA has done a lot. Are you willing to meet these residents, such as Hong Fuk Street in To Kwa Wan? Would you like to meet them and talk to them and help them resolve issues? Dr. Fernando Cheung, you've used up your 4 minutes. They have no chance to answer you. And you have just put another question to them. You have no time. This is not fair to other members. All right, the Secretary has responded to you anyway. I would urge members to observe the 4-minute speaking time and allow time for the administration to respond to you. Otherwise, it is my duty to uphold the speaking time limit. We have limited time. Mr. Edward Lau. In the new territories, we also have aged buildings and older districts. I understand the URA's work is mostly concentrated in urban districts. I understand that, but I'd like to know whether the URA would take on redevelopment projects in the new territories as well. Another question, it is related. Well, we have aged buildings in the new territories, which have maximized the plot ratio. You've done your assessment. Without increasing density or plot ratio, such redevelopment projects may incur losses. You've strived to maximize the use of space. So for your future projects, what about aged buildings with little surplus plot ratio or unused plot ratio? How are you going to deal with these aged buildings? Secretary, I thank Mr. Lau for his questions. First of all, the URA does not distinguish where the buildings are, such as Chunwan. In recent years, the URA might have started new projects in Shamshui Po and Kowloon City. I think it's a matter of priority. It is demand-led. Well, just now they talked about the Yaomong study to quicken the pace of rehabilitating urban districts. Well, we hope the effort made in Yaomong can be expanded to cover other districts. Now, you talked about whether we can increase plot ratio for other residential neighborhoods in other districts. In fact, the administration has been working on it as well. For individual sites, for private residential sites, we can increase the plot ratio by 20%, public housing by 30%. However, we must also bear in mind overdensity. We also need to bear in mind the capacity of the road and transport network. So we should wait for the findings of the Yaomong study and then study further. Well, in fact, in the past, in the complaints office of LegCo, I received complaints. In some districts, the URA takes a demand-led approach. Some building owners might have agreed for the site to be redevelopment, and the developer is in the process of acquiring titles, and then the URA suddenly intervened. In such circumstances, I think the URA should divert its resources elsewhere, because we have dealt with these cases before. If it is found that some developers are working on, say, a certain district, and they have also relied on the appeal mechanism already, can you better handle these cases?
Now, demand-led approach is part of the 2011 program, and for URA, we have undertaken improvements. Now it has been put aside for the time being. Now, we understand that there are other participants who are willing to go ahead. But how do they deal with the small owners? Do they deal with them fairly? We cannot comment. The URA follows the standards of the program. Now there are new projects. It's being put on hold. So we will look at the outcome of the Yaomong study. And we think there can be scope for this approach. Alice Mack. Now I'm a director, a member of the URA. Since 2015, I have made these comments. Now, right now the URA makes acquisitions, and there's open tender for private developers to submit the bids, so they bid at the So they get the land at the highest price, so they sell also at a high price. So many people get the impression that the ULA builds expensive buildings. Now, but this is due to the mode of the development. So can the ULA play a more important role in public housing? So it may be subsidized for sale housing. There can be cooperation with the public housing authorities because under the current mode of development, you end up with expensive products. So will the government strategy follow this mode that I'm suggesting? The housing problem is getting more serious, so we need to consider this approach. And every time the ULA engages in redevelopment, a major problem is in situ resettlement. So many of the residents in the redevelopment area, they face difficulties. They're not willing to move away. So will the government assist the ULA and also the housing, as it does the housing society, to help out these residents so that there can be some sort of resettlement housing for these dislocated members of community? Now, we emphasized that under the Yao Chim study, that we can find a new approach that can speed up redevelopment. But many people get the impression that this is for making more profits. Now, we get some submissions for this meeting which oppose the initiative. They see it as detrimental to the residents. So can you tell the public what is how this will benefit the residents? We agree. Right now, the HA and the Housing Society play a very important role, the main roles in providing public housing. Now, on civil servants housing cooperatives, we try to, in those cases, we try to provide subsidized housing as well as market housing for the private market. Now, it's difficult to come up with new public housing, but we do want to try to increase the role of the ULA in public housing. This is part of the government intention. So, but I believe the HA and the HS will continue to play the main roles. Now, in Kai Tak, we actually found a site which I believe can provide 2,000 public housing units. About half will be for the housing society, for the redevelopment, for the housing, existing housing in Kowloon City. Now I cannot make a formal announcement of this, but we will try to find suitable areas in the urban locations that are in the urban areas for this purpose. Now, this item is scheduled to end at 3:20, but that has gone, and there are two more members who haven't spoken yet. So please indicate your wish to speak. Next, Priscilla Leung. First, I welcome the Development Bureau and the ULA for bringing us the news about the civil servants housing cooperatives redevelopment. There will be pilot projects. Now, for the civil servant housing cooperatives pilot projects, we hope that the affected residents will feel the benefit. For instance, Lockman, San Chun, the residents hope that after redevelopment, the residents feel that they should be settled in the original location. So the pilot projects that you identified are not enough. There are a large number of civil servants housing cooperatives on Hong Kong Island and then on the main land. And then there's the issue of paying land premium. So can you be more flexible there? And I also like to ask about Kim Shin Lane in Sham Shui Po. Now, that has been discussed many times. Now, Mr. Wai said that the redevelopment of Kim Shin Lane will only result in 100 units. So the residents are very disappointed. They feel that they are unlikely to be relocated in the same area. Now, I hope Mr. Chow can go there and take a look. The buildings are dilapidated, so the public housing bodies say that they will lose money. So it's even more difficult for private developers. So some say that if they engage in such projects, they will lose $100 billion. Now, I don't know if that's exaggerated. Now, Mr. Michael Wong, the secretary, is here. I hope the government will be involved. Maybe the URA doesn't engage in these projects because they can't make it financially sustainable. So maybe the government can come up with a solution so that the land can be made available for the benefit of the residents. We thank Ms. Leung for her comments. Now, for the civil servants' housing, we hope that a solution can be found. Right now, there is no market incentive. So for the owner, the arithmetic doesn't work out, so it couldn't be done, and that's where we come in. So when we have the initial details, we will come back and report to LegCo. Our hope is that if the pilot scheme is successful, we will try to extend that as quickly as possible to other districts, including Sham Shui Po. Now, I hope the government can get involved and pay more. Now, they have one simple request. Now, those are old buildings where the ownership rights are very much scattered. So I hope that you help them through Operation Building Bright. Well, you can answer yes or no. Will you consider it? The government always try to help through both effort and resources with regard to the work of the URA. So we have high hopes in the Yamong district study. We hope that benevolent policies would result for all. Dr. QUAT, I'd like to talk about logic with the secretary. Now, there are about 700,000 buildings over 50 years old. Now, the URA's approach of redevelopment has resulted in a limited number of new units. And secondly, it drives prices upward. Queens Road East and Shamshui, etc. Now, the URA's projects result in higher prices in the area. So you are contradicting yourself. And there are experiments around the world in urban renewal. There are several objectives in urban renewal. The government is profit-oriented, it's profit-driven here in Hong Kong, but in other parts of the world, they are truly people-oriented. So whether it's in Wan Chai or Queens Road East, the people cannot go back and live where they used to. So if you are really motivated for urban renewal, now I can give you examples like Barcelona. The owners are able to go back to the community. Of course, during redevelopment, there are temporary arrangements, and then they come back to the old area. So they don't have to chase the market and pay higher prices. And then the government adopts a mode like that for civil servants housing cooperatives. So the building is owned by the owners and each has a number of shares. And the government also has a number of shares. So the original owners, they have to pay a sum for development. If they don't have enough, you have ways to help them through the monetary authority, or you can have reverse mortgage. That mode has been successful in many parts of the world. Your speed of redevelopment is too slow, and it gives rise to new problems such as spiraling upward prices and not enough resources. So can you adopt this approach? You can adopt this approach for maybe 20 to 30,000 buildings. You can adopt this shares approach.
Secretary, I thank Dr. QUAT for his questions, and I agree that the pace of the URA's redevelopment and rehabilitation effort vis-à-vis the building stock in Hong Kong is far from adequate. That is why we come back to the Yau Mong study. We have high hopes because we hope to introduce an overhaul to the existing situation. I'd like to share with you my observations. First, about the financial position of the URA, maximizing profit isn't its objective. In the long term, it should achieve fiscal balance. Perhaps Dr. Kwok just now wasn't in the meeting. If you look ahead for sites with unused plot ratio, take Yau Mong as an example. Using the present approach, another investment of several hundred billion may be required. And flat for flat, we already have this scheme. In other words, for a self-owned property owner who have resided in the unit for over 7 years, the owner can choose to remain in the same district. The only bottleneck is that he must wait for 6 or 7 years. He is entitled to purchase a flat in the same area. Now, flat for flat, well, for de novo projects, I remember there were dozens of cases. Next, Dr. Chen Shung-tai. Thank you, Chairman. First, I hope Mr. Wong, the Secretary, would understand this. We have had this saga surrounding the extradition bill. It poses a great shock to this Council. You don't know whether there would be even far-reaching implications, just like the e-cigarettes bill this morning. In fact, the members across the political spectrum supported the idea of suspending the bill for further discussion. This also applies to the URA's work at the community level. We're now in a state of shock. Secretary, you should do more, and you should understand that. About the URA's initiating projects, district-based projects. Well, we have met with district council members and community leaders. Apart from their views on the URA's rehabilitation and redevelopment work in the Tsuen Wan, Tuen Mun district councils, in fact, predominantly Tuen Mun district council, there are strong views on why the URA hasn't even contacted the community to redevelop Tuen Mun New Town, let alone consultation. If Kowloon City is your priority, followed by Tsuen Wan, and then finally, 10 years down the road, planning for the development of Tuen Mun New Town, I have this constructive suggestion for the government. We're in a turbulent state. Please be careful not to make some half-baked mistakes because of half-baked ideas. So, for projects initiated by the URA itself, they tend to be more controversial. Secretary, let's see if you can work on them to allay the concerns of the community so that local residents would have a better idea of the URA's plan and work in the future. Secretary, I thank Dr. Chang for his comments and questions. I visited different local communities recently, and I've heard different, similar views. Say for Taipei Square and Yipei Square in Tsuen Wan, you may recall there was a residential development project in Tsuen Wan. Can we have another example? Well, but we need to prioritize different projects. The URA's priority at the moment is Kowloon, but this is not a fixed policy. It depends on the URA's resources. As I reiterated just now, when the Yau Mong study has been completed, we may take a bolder step in revitalizing urban districts. I've heard you loud and clear that we should consult extensively different stakeholders. Chairman, in short, I'd like to focus on redeveloping old districts. Secretary, especially for Tuen Mun District Council, you should also have a good understanding. For Tuen Mun New Town, previously there was a redevelopment of the Tuen Mun Health Center, and then near the plaza, there were rumors about high-rise developments. For local residents, if they have no idea about the redevelopment projects, when it will be Tuen Mun's turn, well, these may create tension. Secretary, you need to do more. Yes, I note his comment and I thank Dr. Chang. So much for this item. Once again, I'd like to thank the Secretary, Mr. Chow, and their teams for attending our meeting. Moving on to the next item, development of common spatial data infrastructure and 3D digital map. Let me go through the attendance list. We have Deputy Secretary for Development, Ms. Doris Ho, and Mr. Thomas Chan, Director of Lands Department, Mr. Ray Leung, Deputy Director, Survey and Mapping, Lands Department, and Mr. Anthony Chiu, Acting Assistant Government Chief Information Officer from OGCIO, and Ms. Winnie Xu, Chief Land Surveyor, Spatial Data Infrastructure of the Development Bureau. I understand you have prepared a PowerPoint presentation, is that right? Director, would you like to walk us through? Yes, Chairman, members, good afternoon. We're here today to brief members on the latest project, that is to develop a common spatial data infrastructure (CSDI) and a three-dimensional digital map, 3D digital map. With members' support, we will proceed to applying for funding with the Finance Committee. Let me start by introducing the common spatial data infrastructure. Why is it so important? What is meant by common data? Spatial data means any data with a location. In fact, in our daily life, we use tablets and computers and mobile phones, and very often we have spatial data in these devices. In fact, over 80% of data has a spatial dimension, according to academics. These include the records of maps, facilities, logistics, healthcare facilities, traffic conditions, etc. At the moment, however, most data are scattered among different government departments. They are not standardized. They may have a geo address or other information. Yet they are not properly geotagged, which make the data difficult to be discovered or shared. Now, the common spatial data infrastructure is a common platform. It's also a policy direction so that we can use a map-based information infrastructure, leveraging GIS technology. We can standardize the spatial data. They can be based on agreed standards. They can be stored, searched, shared, explored, assimilated, and analyzed. So we can consolidate different data sources. Apart from public sector, we can also involve private sector, academic, research, or public and developers. All parties can make use of the shared data. Now we have the Hong Kong Smart City Blueprint. The vision of the blueprint is to develop Hong Kong into a world-class smart city. And in Hong Kong 2030 Plus, we also propose that we need a smart city information infrastructure and technology platform to facilitate Hong Kong's development into a world-class smart city so that we can support more smart facilities in the future. We need to use a number of smart technologies in information infrastructure, namely common spatial data infrastructure, 3D digital map, and also building information modeling, BIM. In fact, in Policy Address 2017-18, the CE suggested we should promote the establishment of a CSDI. We should also implement the open data policy. In this year's budget, the Financial Secretary earmarked $300 million to develop a geospatial data sharing platform and 3D digital maps of the whole territory. I'm going to give you some examples of existing applications that can be enhanced so that members will have a better understanding of how the CSDI is to be used and what the data contained can do for us. Now, in the interest of time, I'll be very brief. For details, we'll be happy to answer members' questions later. One example is this. We have been conducting a dengue fever risk assessment for the FEHD, that is in relation to the ovary trap indices and hotspots of dengue fever. We conduct analysis so that we can decide which areas we should enhance our effort on. And we also use 3D digital map to compile simulations. In the event of heavy downpour, what are the effective means to predict the flooding area and how we can help residents. The third example is commonly used by residents: door-to-door journey planning and navigation. At the moment, such apps are commonly used by road users. In the future, we'd like to include pedestrian networks as well, so that navigation can be made available for pedestrians. We can include 3D footbridges, underpasses, public passageways, traversing buildings. All these can be included for indoor positioning and navigation. The other smart use is parking space finding system. Through collaboration with the Transport Department, we have information about the existing public car parks, and with the parking space finding system, we have been disseminating this information. In the future, with real-time information and traffic data, we can disseminate such real-time information to the public, so that in the future, parking space reservation for parking space could be made. These are all potential uses. Now, the other example is the Lands Department's webpage. We're striving to increase the accessibility and transparency of land records. For vacant school premises and vacant government sites, we upload such information on the map website for use by organizations. Short-term tenancy and private lots, as well as government lots, are also gradually uploaded on the government map for public access. We'd like to further expand the map to cover other land records and facilitate linkage to them, so that the public or the sector can have easy access to this information. The other point is about linkage of land boundary information and land registry information. Starting from the end of 2017, we have been uploading the land boundary information and land registry information to the website. Our next step is to make such information open for sharing, so that we can share with the public and the sector. Another use is identification of heritage sites. This is to facilitate public departments or private sector. As they carry out works, they can have regard to the heritage data nearby, which can help us better preserve heritage relics. The other point is about a town planning study. We have a 3D map and we have geodata. With sufficient data, we can plan for we can have proper town planning, including the provision of facilities and services, and also to plan for new buildings.
例子啦，就係包括
For instance, visual impact analysis, how new buildings will affect the view of the city, of the ridge line, and so on. It will also engage in air ventilation assessment. Now, with the 3D digital map, we can make better assessment, and same for noise assessment, because this is also a 3D application. And also in land valuation and real estate management, now with the 3D digital map, we can better understand the view, location, etc. of a particular building, so that the surveyors can make better assessment of land value, property value. And there are new applications now on the under the common spatial data infrastructure. We hope to develop a geo address to allow matching of textual address in multiple formats to a common identifier to facilitate interdepartmental e-government services. We use of spatial coordinate information and address data can be effectively visualized on a map, and then this will be released under the address lookup service. And then there's tracking of pavement and road repair work. Now, with the new infrastructure, we make the pavement and road management more effective and efficient. There will be the dashboard that uses charts, gauges, and maps to provide up-to-date and consolidated pavement and road information. And with the different departments providing time and location data, we can make use of programming to provide data as ingredients for smart city and application development. Now, and then when there are contingencies, when there is traffic management measure in force, then we can engage in contingency, door-to-door planning and management. And then there are food banks which distribute food, and the spatial data infrastructure will enable them to distribute food to the needy so that they can provide better service in better logistic arrangements. And very often startups have to engage in market research that involve spatial data. With sufficient spatial data, they can analyze the market better. Now, the CSDI vision is to provide a platform so that business and the general population can get the latest spatial data. We hope to maximize innovation, knowledge, and value creation for the government, business, and the community, so as to contribute to a livable, competitive, innovative, sustainable, and smart Hong Kong. There are several major initiatives, or major objectives on this infrastructure. First, major CSDI deliverables that are available early, and then this will facilitate, this will provide a mechanism for leadership and better leadership and governance, and the data and technology will be subject to standards so that the data can be consolidated and used, and then there will be funding. We will secure sufficient funding for ensuring momentum and long-term financial sustainability of CSDI. Finally, we also attach much importance to capacity building, outreach, and partnership to the community at large to create an enabling environment for a wider community to participate in the sharing and use of spatial information. So the features and components of the CSDI this is part of the Hong Kong Geodata store that we started at the end of last year. we have about 79 departments which are already providing data on the Hong Kong Geodata Store, so that the public can download the data through these application programming interfaces. And in particular, the departments under the Development Bureau and the information in connection with town planning have been added to the CSDI and made available through the Hong Kong Data Store. There is a standardization process so that the departments can subject the data available in their own department to this standardization, and then furnishing the data to the public free of charge. Now, while we construct the CSDI, we will also construct the 3D digital map. Now, in Smart City Initiative, we need to make more use of 3D digital data. So there's the two-dimensional map, and then we have height and story data. So there will be 3 stages, the 3D maps for visualization. Now that will be introduced at the end of this year or early next year. So the 3D maps will be released to the public, and then there will be a 3D pedestrian network data for, and then in the second stage, the 3D maps for unit-based indoor applications. This will show the building interiors. By 2023, over 1,000 buildings will have their internal 3D data become available. And finally, in stage 3, we hope to achieve a genuine 3D map for city modeling. So anyone who wishes to make use of 3D maps for city modeling can do so, as I have mentioned already. Now, for the CSDI and the 3D maps, now in 2019 to 20, now the internal interface that we are using will be made available to the public. So this territory-wide map using data from the land registry will be made available. And then and we will develop a district dashboard so that the application developers and the public can see what data is available which they can use. And we will have address data infrastructure, so the existing address data can be incorporated in spatial data. We hope that by 2021 the CSDI portal will be opened up to all government departments, so that they can see and then we will add over 70 geodata stores made available to the government departments, and then by 2020 it will be open to the public. And on financial implications, now under the budget, the Financial Secretary has set aside $300 million to develop a geospatial data sharing platform. That's $150 million for the CSDI, including the portal and the some short-term deliverables, and this will also provide training to the departments concerned. For the other $150 million, this is to develop the 3D digital map, including the 3D pedestrian network, the accessible interior of some landmark buildings and structures will be made available, and also the topographical and exterior features of terrain, building, and infrastructures will also be included. And we will set aside $17.5 million for CSDI development, and for the 3D digital map, $23 million to provide training and for to start some cloud service. We thank you for the detailed information. Now, the funding proposal, now according to Rule of Procedure 83A, now if any member has direct or indirect pecuniary interest on what he speaks on, he has to disclose, a member has to disclose the nature of the interest before he speaks. So there are now 6 members who wish to speak. Gary Fan, Yang Ok, Lau Yip Keung, Mok Nai Kwong, myself, Elizabeth QUAT, 4 minutes each. Gary Fan first. Thank you, Chairman. It was a very detailed introduction. $300 million will be spent on the CSDI and the 3D digital map. Better late than never. Hong Kong has been criticized as lagging behind the UK, US, and Taiwan. Now, the data provided by the government is very limited in format, so that application developers can have difficulty making use of them.
As per the presentation and also from the discussion paper, I understand that the downloadable data can be used as raw material, and then there will be value-added products, and then there will be open data sets. The interface will also be open for use for sharing by different parties. So my question is about the CSDI, whether there is a mandatory requirement that all policy bureaus and government departments should use machine-readable formats such as XML and CSV instead of DARTs and PDF, which are not open data. Second question. Once the data is open for sharing, can the data be used by the community, private developers, to create innovative products to facilitate the public? Question number 3, what about the nature of open data? Parking information, will there be requirements, for example, that the data must be in real time, it must be dynamic, not static, and is there a timetable for implementing these measures? Mr. Chen, Thank you, Mr. Fan, for his questions. Let me answer his questions. Basically, for data on CSDI, they must come with common standards so that the data can be placed easily on the map and for easy integration. Second, it should be machine-readable format, and it should also be open. So for XML and other formats, they will be available. The third point we stress on the CSDI portal is that we need to have an API, that is Application Programming Interface. Developers must use the API to handle the data instead of downloading the data first. The CSDI platform has the objective of facilitating use by the community. So first of all, it will be open when we also allow private developers and enterprises to use open data for commercial purposes or for adding value to their products, on one condition, that the format should be preserved. In other words, the format should be standardized and should be open so as to allow future use by others. Third point, apart from downloadable data, we aim at updating data in real time in the future. We'll discuss with the relevant government departments on how the real-time data can be made available for users. Mr. Gary Fan, would you support this item to be submitted to the FC? I need to hear from the administration first. Mr. Alvin Young, about the data being made available to business startups and the public, I think this is a good deed. Director, however, I'd like to ask a question on the digital map. At the moment, there is a charge of $54 for a 1 to 1,000 map. Will there be a charge in the future? For the 1 to 1,000 digital map currently available, because of a legacy issue, we have been charging a fee, but we will review all the relevant charges under the Lands Department. We will discuss and see whether they can be made available for free. Let me supplement. Our direction is that all data available on the CSDI platform should be free, with one exception. For example, if a government department is required to provide real-time data to the private sector, incurring a cost, there may be another arrangement. But in general, we do hope to provide free data. Chairman, well, I think it is understandable that the government would like to recover costs as a matter of principle. And I'm happy to hear about the government's response. And I have another question on the macroscopic level. Earlier this year, during Special Finance Committee meetings, we asked the government departments. For example, the government might have spent $30 million on developing a mobile application with really low hit rate. Is it value for money? We asked the government whether they conducted such an assessment. Now you're asking for resources from the public coffers. I'd like to know from the administration whether they are confident that it will be welcomed by the public, whether the map and the platform will be put to good use. Do you have any value for money assessment? Mr. Alvin Young's question is very valid. I want to stress that for the CSDI, at the moment, among government departments, we are sharing spatial data. Through an internal system provided by the Lands Department, a government department can retrieve spatial data from another department. So when we consider the efficiency or cost benefits in the future, first we consider the internal use by government departments. In other words, the extent of retrieving spatial data among government departments and the usage of such data. We have been conducting research to help government departments obtain spatial data and apply technology. The other point is about the sector. We're going to engage the academics, the profession, the IT sector, so that we can set up an advisory structure so that with more views collected, we can make better use of the CSDI. Very briefly, Chairman, just now Deputy Director mentioned that there will be a review. Do you have a timetable, 1 or 2 years? On the matter of charges, right? In fact, at the end of last year, some colleagues have already begun their work. Meaning what? I mean, they will start the work at the end of this year. Right, the Civic Party needs more time to look into the matter and decide whether to support it. Mr. Lau Yip-Keung, Deputy Chair. Thank you, Chairman. The CSDI and 3D digital map have extensive uses, and we have GIS and BIM, building information modeling. These technologies are very useful in building roads and buildings, in monitoring construction progress, cost effectiveness, and the building components. In rural areas, this is much needed. In Annex 3 or Annex C, I understand that supposedly the system can predict flooding to help rural residents. It can also help promote heritage and green tourism to make the tours more interesting. I welcome that as well. I hope the government will develop the system as soon as possible. My question is this: what will the recurrent manpower and posts needed after this is developed? Director, thank you. As we mentioned briefly, in terms of the common spatial data infrastructure, the estimated expenditure is $17.5 million. The recurrent spending for 3D digital map is $22 million. We have set up an office for CSDI. It's a cross-department office, and it is tasked with coordination. For the survey and mapping office under the Lands Department, there will be additional manpower to support the development of the CSDI. We have a number of new development areas. We have development projects in progress. So what role would this system play in these development projects? And also for preliminary studies, can this system replace consultants so as to lower the cost? Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the questions. For NDAs, from design to construction, data will be stored in BIM format, and we do see a potential. For example, the building environment and BIM data in NDAs. We'll consider how they can be incorporated in the CSDI platform. It should be feasible, and we are discussing with the technical department, that is CEDD, on how selected BIM data can be included on our platform, and we'll follow up on this matter. All right, no more questions? In principle, I support it. Thank you. Mr. Charles Mock. Thank you, Chairman. In principle, I support this item. But you don't need to consult me because I'm not really a member of this panel, even if I want to support it. I support it because this is fundamental. If we want to develop Hong Kong into a smart city to allow sharing of data, this is only fundamental to combine spatial information with the existing data. Previously, this was done manually, involving a complicated procedure, and the display of data is also such that it is difficult to comprehend or analyze. I'd like to pick up on Mr. Alvin Young's point. You mentioned about the charges of digital map. It will be subject to review. But I think after all, this is a policy decision. Over the years, we have heard enterprises from the private sector telling me, in fact, this was done 3 or 4 years ago. The enterprise would like to develop data, and then in the end they moved to Singapore because they were charged various fees for obtaining data. When it comes to cost recovery, it's really a matter of principle. Sometimes you could waive the charge. If you're really minded to promote smart city and promote innovation and entrepreneurship, I think you should make a policy decision. And you should make this decision as soon as possible. 3 or 4 years ago, I think some frontline officers of Lands Department told me back then that they were doing working on digital map, and their response was that they were able to make much technical progress. But when it came to the frontline work, there was no support for, say, updating the map. So 2 or 3 years down the road, the map became really obsolete. Now we have rapid technological advances. We have different mapping technologies. So you're now proposing to have 3D digital map. Financially, I hope you can resolve the old problems. In the past, you used to rely on satellites and other surveying methods to prepare your map. But according to the response I receive, 2 or 3 years down the road, it would be really difficult to secure extra resources to update the map. And then you would just wait until the map is obsolete and then you apply to start afresh. It's a waste. I hope this funding application would include these factors. Director. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wong, for the questions. For the digital map, as I mentioned, we'll review the charges in due course. The ultimate objective is to allow open data for the public. We'll strive to provide data for the sector for free. And as I mentioned just now, there will also be an application programming database, interface, API. We anticipate that the API will be open to programmers for free for the purpose of helping them, and so that they don't need to buy the digital maps. They can just use the API.
And I must admit that updating an existing set of spatial data, especially 3D map, is a major challenge. Now, we said that only by 2023 will we have the data infrastructure applied to 1,500 buildings. So we want to put the data into the 3D digital map, and we want to make sure that the data is updated and accurate. So this has to be done step by step, and we cannot be complacent because technology is moving very fast. Now, sometimes the technology application requires updating very soon. Now, the application for funding poses a difficulty. It's a limitation in the way that the application is made. So I think you do have the funds, but it's how people get hold of such funds or gain access to such funds. To follow up, now this system, digital data, now you have a long name. The Development Bureau and the Innovation Bureau come up with the CSDI steering committee. The two bureaus will be responsible. And I'm a bit concerned that there won't be any genuine leadership under two bureaus. So I'd like to gain a better understanding about the way the committee works. Now, how do you continue and update the system so that the system meets the society's needs? And then there's the question of money. As Mr. Charles Mock pointed out, now you go to LegCo every time for funding. Now we welcome that, but sometimes you fall behind the progress in technology. So the committee monitors the system. Is there a policy on sustainable development? Do you have a mechanism for that? The Bureau will answer this question on the spatial data. The steering committee, Common Spatial Data Steering Committee, is under the leadership of the Innovation and Technology Bureau and Development Bureau from now until 2022. Now, the CSDI data will be mainly from Development Bureau. So at least during this period, the Development Bureau will bear the bulk of the responsibility, and we will work with the GCIO and the Land Registry and Lands Department and the IT Bureau. So it's not that our work stops at 2022. Our work after 2022 may become more difficult. We don't want to limit the data to those from the Development Bureau. The other departments and also have the other bureaus, the Census and Statistics Department, the real-time arrival data of buses under the Transport Department. All these would be opened up after 2022 by stages. And for data within the government departments, we don't stop there. the data from, say, bus companies, public utilities, the data on ducts and pipelines. Over time, they can be put on the CSDI. So the steering committee will continue to work on this, monitoring development of the CSDI. Now, on resources, I'd like to add, now, the chief executive leads the information technology committee, and the financial secretary also gives us support with the provision of $300 million for the initial launching. So I believe we will not lack funding from the high level, with support from the high level of government. I personally support this scheme, Elizabeth QUAT. Now, all along, I have urged the government to develop the CSDI as soon as possible. Now, we want to develop technology and innovation and smart city. Now, we need better infrastructure. Now, the CSDI, the EID, the COP, electronic payment. Now, every time when I attend to these meetings, I keep reminding the officials and even the CE. So we need such infrastructure to move ahead on smart city. So I support the early development of CSDI. Originally under Smart City Blueprint, it said that CSDI would only be available in 2023. I'm glad to know that it's now going to be made available by stages, and it's going to be under a steering committee. So I support that. Now, my suggestion or comment is that I've been in touch with many government departments. Now, for the CSDI and 3D digital map to be successful, all the government departments have to participate and put data on the platform. However, the various government departments are at different levels of application of IT technology. Now, they need to put data that is really useful to the public and to business. So you need a lot of coordination, and you need to provide a lot of hand-holding, and you need a lot of resources. I'm a bit concerned that you may not have the manpower to take the work ahead, since it involves so many departments, and to make sure that the data put on the platform is genuinely useful. Now, in the UK, they have a committee on spatial data. They formulate the policy for government departments to make their data available. Now, does your committee have such powers? No, and I agree with the other members. If the private sector is to make use of such data, it should be inexpensive, and the APIs should be convenient. Deputy Secretary, we thank Ms. QUAT for her support to our work. Now, on the steering committee to be set up, now its membership should include all those departments who would be putting data onto the CSDI. With their participation, we can monitor the speed of development of CSDI and the pace of the opening up and sharing of the data. Now, when the committee encounters difficulties, when we need to make adjustments to policies, or if we need greater support from the departments, we can approach the steering committee on IT that is chaired by the CE, and we'll get support from that committee. So that will make it easier for us to do our work. Now, apart from that steering committee, there is a spatial data office which will provide day-to-day support to the spatial data office. There are 6 colleagues and they will have increasing workload, so we will try to get more resources to gain greater manpower support. Elizabeth QUAT will support this item. I will. DAB also. Next, Helena Wong. Now, Chairman, now I'd like to ask, now I see that this database appears to be not just limited to the land data, etc., under the Development Bureau. Now, the $300 million will that cover the other departments to facilitate their putting data on the platform? Now, for instance, social welfare. Now, there's only the locations of community halls, etc. Now, but you should inform people of the availability of childcare centers, centers for the elderly, the locations for residential elderly homes, whether there are vacancies in those institutions and so on. Right now, this information is not available. Now, will you be talking to the Labor and Welfare Bureau so that the childcare, the elderly homes, and also information for the disabled, should also be made available. But you do have quite a lot of education related data. Now, I think the public would be more interested in the social welfare facilities that they can make use of. Also, we need data on the parks and cycling tracks and the hiking trails and so on.
Mosquitoes. I know that you have the OV trap index, which can show you the distribution of mosquitoes. What about the rodent infestation index? Why don't you include it? You have rodents presence in every district. There are also queries that one is bitten by mice. So why do you have one for mosquitoes but not for rodents? Perhaps you can answer these questions first. Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Member, for the question. For data to be included in a CSDI platform in the future, well, as my colleague mentioned just now, we'd like to encourage policy bureaus and government departments, as a matter of policy, that unless there is special policy consideration because of, say, security or data privacy, all government departments are encouraged to upload the data to our platform. Like the other member said, we are taking things step by step. Before 2022, the Development Bureau and the 10 government departments under it will contribute data to the platform, but we would like to gradually open up after 2022. Members just refer to some examples such as welfare facilities, cycling tracks. Now, at first glance, there should not be any exceptional policy considerations. I personally believe it can be made available on the platform as well, but of course I'll need to discuss with the relevant policy bureau. So that means you are actively reaching out to different policy bureaus to obtain data so that the data can be merged to your platform, or should they take the initiative? Thank you, member, for the question. What we're hoping for is that the steering committee set up jointly by the Development Bureau and the IT Bureau would work on the available data under the two bureaus first. I would say this forms the basis, but we'd like to take a step further and reach out to departments outside the Development Bureau's ambit, because I think the community may be more interested in certain data such as those you mentioned. So if possible, we'd like to reach out to other departments. We hope they can come forward and take the initiative to discuss with us and consider opening up the data. Thank you, Deputy Secretary. So much for this topic. We've heard members' views. The majority of members agree for this item to be submitted to the Finance Committee. Once again, I thank Deputy Secretary and the Director and your colleagues for coming here and explaining the paper to us. Item 5, PWP item number 43CG, Greening Master Plans for the New Territories. Let's invite the administration to come in. We have Deputy Secretary Ms. Joey Lam from Works Development Bureau, Ms. Vina Wong, Head of Greening and Landscape Office of the Development Bureau. From the CDD, we have Deputy Head of Civil Engineering Office, Port and Land, Mr. Ricky Wong. Also from the CDD, Chief Engineer, Land Works, Mr. Choi Wing Hing. CDD, Chief Landscape Architect, Headquarters, Ms. Yulai Han. And also from the CDD, Senior Landscape Architect 1, Mr. Simon Ng. May I invite Deputy Secretary to walk us through the paper. Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. Today we'd like to have this opportunity to brief members on the greening master plans for Southwest and Northeast NT New Territories. This is a district-based plan with greening themes for different areas. And in the interest of time, I would invite the Chief Engineer, Mr. Choi, to walk us through the plan. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. I will brief members on the details of this plan. The purpose of drawing up a greening master plan is to prepare a district-based master plan for different districts to provide guidelines on the design and implementation of the works. We'll propose the locations for greening with suitable greening themes and also suitable species. Public engagement is very important in drawing up the GMP. We also adopt the approach of enhanced participation or partnering approach. We set up a district participation group with the DCs and RCs, rural committees. We also conduct site visits with them to identify suitable locations for greening. We also held a number of sessions with the district participation group to collect views from the community. For the GMP for Southwest and any new territories, 5 districts are covered: Kwai Ching, Chuen Wan Islands, North District, and Tai Po. We consulted the DCs and rural committees. Between 2013 and 2019, we consulted the Kwai Ching, Chuen Wan Islands District, North District, and Tai Po District Councils. These DCs are very supportive of our GMP. As for the coverage in these 5 districts, they include the town centers, the tourist attractions, and areas with good transport access. We're going to plant 1,850 trees and 830,000 shrubs. For Kwai Ching, the theme is Blue Breeze and Green Vista. It describes the green space of Kwai Ching with tranquility, and the major tree species include Ecalocarpus balancei, etc. For Chuen Wan, the theme is Green Vibrance. The greening theme reflects the bustling street life of the cosmopolitan, colorful urban area and diversity of setting and scenery in Chuen Wan. The recommended tree species are balancei, Bauhinia variegata, and Waldeatia bifurcata. For the islands, the theme is Tranquil Seascape, Flourishing Isles, reflecting the tranquil mountains and predominantly rural but dynamic and expanding character of the outlying islands. The recommended tree species include native canopy trees. And the next one is North District. The theme is a landscape born of river and mountain, reflecting Robin's Nest, Pak Sin Lang, and other scenery, showing fruitful greenery to North District. The major tree species include Lagerstromia speciosa, Bauhinia and Blackinia, Malia aceratus, etc. Tai Po District, the theme is History and Harmony and the Urban Landscape. There are a number of mountains in Tai Po, creating an outstanding natural setting. The recommending tree species are Tebibua, Pantaphylla, Brachychiton, Acerifolius, etc. You can see in the small photo the existing environment. In the larger picture, it is an artist's impression. After our greening efforts, what will it look like? Like in Shek Pai Street, Kwai Ching, off Shek Yi House, there will be some greening. The other spot is the Safety Island at the junction of Hing Ling Road and Hing Fong Road. You can see the improvement in Chuen Wan. We have this roundabout and Ching Long Tau section of Castle Peak Road. And also another example under the flyover of Ching Shun Road. Islands, we have the place near the Dong Chong Pier and Hing Tong Street. In North District, we have the PTI near Ching Ho Estate and also Fanling Huaming Road. In Tai Po, we have the junction of Tai Po Road and Nam Wan Road, and also outside Tai Po government offices. Our next step is to submit the item to Public Works Subcommittee and the Finance Committee for funding approval. We hope this can be funding can be secured by the 4th quarter of 2019, so that works can commence in the 1st quarter of 2020 for completion in the 1st quarter of 2023. Thank you, members. We welcome questions from members. Thank you. This item is a funding proposal. Will members please note that in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure, if a member wishes to speak on an item which he has direct or indirect pecuniary interest, please disclose the nature of your interest before you speak. Each member will be given 4 minutes. Let me read out the names. Ms. Tanya Chan, Mr. Gary Fan, Dr. Helena Wong, Mr. Edward Lau, Mr. Kenneth Lau, Deputy Chair, and Dr. Hon QUAT. Altogether 6 members. Let's start with Ms. Tanya Chan. Frankly, for GMPs, this is definitely supported by district councils and local residents. We all like to beautify our own districts. I don't know whether you know about the audit report number 72. Chapter 2 refers to the management of greening master plans. The audit has made a number of recommendations. The government usually says the recommendations are accepted, but in your paper, I don't know whether you have referred to these recommendations. It was published in April. I don't think your work has been completed within a short period of time. So the question is whether you've learned a lesson and whether you will pay particular attention to the problems. For example, in the executive summary, there are some recommendations. I'm concerned because in built-up communities, you'd also like to make greening efforts, but I wonder how you're going to deal with geotechnical conditions, whether the trees will collapse when a typhoon strikes. So that's a point about the soil quality and the maintenance and the future maintenance. Second, the locations, the species, whether they are resistant to wind, strong wind. Because if you go to Deepwater Bay, you would see all trees have collapsed. So along the beach, you need to plan afresh what species should be planted to tackle the climate change. How are you going to tackle this? Nobody is against greening. The point is rather whether you have learned a lesson in improving your GMP. When funding was first approved, I was also a member, if my memory serves me right. This time round, I hope the funding will really help make our community greener. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Chan. About the audit report's recommendations, we accept them. And before submitting this paper, we have taken this into account. Basically, this paper has been postponed for 2 months exactly because we wanted to absorb the recommendations and improve our work. According to the audit report, as you can see, sometimes after greening work, the LCSD would be tasked to take up maintenance. And we may have different record-keeping standards. And we've learned a lesson. And we have ironed out the interfacing problem. Before we hand over the site to the LCSD for daily maintenance, we already take measurements of the trees and plants so that our records will tally. In the past, we devised short, medium, and long-term measures in the GMP. For longer-term measures, after the sites are handed over, there may be new developments. And we failed to follow up on some problems, but this won't happen again in future. Ms. Chan also referred to a number of points. They are all valid after Typhoon Mangkhut. In the case of failed trees, we also conducted analysis and we also conducted studies.
We also issued a directory on planting trees on streets. We found 80 species that can be tried out in Hong Kong. We tried to adapt to the climate. So we choose trees that are hardy in relation to winds, flooding, and drought. And we try to use biomaterials that can let the soil absorb water in a better way. It's a very comprehensive answer. Perhaps it can be provided in writing. We can. Next, Gary Fan. I have questions on time, experience, and adjustment. Now, since we carried out the exercise on Central and Tsim Sha Tsui in 2007, we are now coming to the 6 districts in New Territories, but still we haven't done Kowloon City, Wong Tai Sin, etc. Now, it took well over 10 years to cover the districts that I named. Now, will that mean a long time? It will be a long time before we can cover the rest. Now, for instance, some districts are divided into sub-districts. Now, will 10-year chance point is that will you learn from experience and make adjustments to the greening program, and also on the Mankind experience there were over 6,000 collapses of trees. And Mr. Chim Chi-yong, an expert, noted that the qualities of trees planted are very varied, and where trees collapsed, it can be seen that the soil is mixed with construction waste. So that affected the growth of the trees. So maybe the government didn't allow enough space for the tree roots to grow. So the trees appear beautiful. However, will you have ducts to allow trees to grow? Will you have metal frames or support structures so that the trees can grow healthily and withstand major typhoons? Now, major typhoons such as Mankind do cause trees to collapse, but we try to make our trees more tough and tenacious. Now, on the Greening Master Plan in 2011, basically we completed the plan. Now for Southeastern New Territories and Northeastern New Territories, those have been completed basically. Now, as for the experience from Mankind, now for the replacement planting after Mankind, we said that it would take 2 years. Or more than 2 years. We cannot just plant right away. We have to conduct a review. Trees have been developing with the city over quite a few decades. So sometimes they are too close together. So when we replant, we try to examine the soil we try to link the spaces for two trees, and on some slopes where the incline is more than 35 degrees, we will not plant trees anymore. So we will pay heed to the qualities of different species of trees so as to minimize the damage from major typhoons. I'd like to ask the chief engineer, Mr. Wong, to tell us about his experience in greening. Now, on urban greening, that's in 3 stages. First, Chim Sha Tsui in Central, that was completed in 2007. Second, Mong Kok, Wan Chai, Causeway Bay, that was completed in 2009. Third phase, Sham Shui Po, Kowloon City, Wong Tai Sin, Southern District, Eastern District, that was completed in 2011. Now, with such experience, we learned that the growth of tree roots are very important to the growth of trees. So for southwestern neutral trees and northeastern neutral trees that's coming up, we try to have a tree corridor. Now, the tree roots will be able to have a firmer grasp on the soil. This is the measure that we will, among the measures that we will introduce for these 2 major districts of tree planting. Gary Fan, you will support this item? Thank you. Next, Helena Wong. Chairman, now I'd like to ask, recently we heard from Professor Chim Chi-Yong. Now he analyzed the pictures of tree collapses after man-cut. Now it's common sense. The holes for the trees are too small. There isn't enough soil. It's too shallow. There is a banyan tree 4 to 5 feet, and then there are only several centimeters of soil, and then it's concrete or cement below. So will the government plant the trees themselves, or will you outsource the planting? Do they have the knowledge? Do you have guidelines for the depth of the tree hole, etc.? Now, why is it that they didn't excavate the soil to a sufficient depth? Now, so you do replacement planting. Now, if you don't allow enough space, then you will simply waste the money. Can you ensure that tree plantings in the future will be subject to certain standards and to monitoring? You have to ensure what happens after the tree is planted. Now, how do you ensure that the problems outlined by Professor Jim will not recur? We have a lot of trees, and what you said, what you outlined should not have occurred. Well, that's history. We try to be forward-looking. Now, we do have standards for the trees to be planted under the GMP. Several years ago, we already set standards for the tree holes. Now, under the GMP, what trees are to be planted, and for each tree, our colleagues monitor very closely to make sure that the trees are of good quality and that there is sufficient soil. We will step up the monitoring to ensure that substandard planting will not recur. Are the tree plantings outsourced? Yes. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be poor quality. What matters is monitoring and standards. In 2013, the size of the tree holes has already been standardized to be followed by all works departments. Now, is your standard outdated? Now, the shallow tree holes were those are subject to the old or new standards. Our new standards are in line with international standards. Now, these trees which collapse so easily, they indicate that your department did not monitor the growth of the trees properly. And so it's a waste of money. Now, if your monitoring system is inadequate, the tree collapses will recur. So apart from the climate factor, the problem rests with your monitoring. In your tendering, you should stipulate the depth of the tree holes, and there should be staff dedicated to monitoring to make sure that the trees are planted to the depth required. You should have staff watching the planting of the trees. Now, you should make sure that the trees planted can grow. Now, there should be enough space. Will you support this item? They should let us see how the monitoring is done. Perhaps you should supply information on the monitoring arrangement. We do outsource the planting to contractors. We do have site staff to monitor the planting, and in 2010 to 11, the Development Bureau issued guidelines for correct planting. Now, of the $300 million not allocated, $70 million are for planting, and then there is a sum for on-site staff who would monitor the planting in a professional manner, and they are attached to the site. Now, there have been deficiencies in the past. The guidelines were not followed strictly enough. Please let us have your guidelines. And guidelines are not enough. You have to ensure that they follow the guidelines. You have to tell us about the mechanisms. Next, Lau Kwok Fan.
Thank you, Chairman. Of course, I support the idea of making our communities greener by introducing the GMPs. But I think this is a really long-standing task. I remember a long time ago you started with North District and you have only proposed the plan for North District now. It's been a long time. I remember we went for a site visit. It was several years ago. I don't think there is a major problem with planting more trees. Definitely, we understand that we will be planting more trees. But I wonder about maintenance. because at the moment at the roadside, and I'm not even talking about trees, I'm talking about shrubs, other plants. I think the maintenance work is deteriorating. So once this is completed, I want to know the department in charge of maintenance and trimming, for example. Which department is responsible? Apart from trees, you also have other kinds of plants. I don't know, this is not only about planting trees, right? Second point, I understand there are many green groups in the community. And some groups have got in touch with me as you were preparing the plan. They would like to have more greening in their communities as well. Well, I think you get the idea. I don't want to name names, but these groups have been doing publicity for some major corporations. They got in touch with me. It seems that I don't know which department I should follow up this issue with. After all, your objective is screening. Would you enlist the help of these green groups? Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Lau. For the plants stipulated in the GMPs, the majority of them will be maintained by the LCSD. There are standards. When we complete the GMP and hand over the sites, we will stipulate the maintenance requirements for every species. For example, the intervals for applying fertilizers would also require the relevant departments to conduct tree risk assessments every year. For planters and shrubs, irrigation and maintenance will be needed. This is done by the LCSD, and we will be careful about it. About engaging the community, I will defer to Mr. Wong. Well, as we mentioned in the PowerPoint, we have the enhanced partnership approach, meaning that there are 4 points. We actively liaise with the rural committees and district councils. And we also conduct joint site visits with district councillors to visit their constituencies. And we also set up community liaison groups. That is to say, that the relevant district councillor can set up a working group with us. I know I am a North District Councillor. We also have a community platform with the participation of rural committees and district councils as well as green groups. We also engage schools and owners corporations. We would collect views from them at the design stage, and when we actually commence works, we would send questionnaire to shop operators, schools, and residents, because it will be after some time when we actually commence works, and some operators may have changed. Mr. Wafan, would you support this item? Thank you. Next, Mr. Kenneth Lau, Deputy Chair. Chairman, the government has been carrying out greening in the urban districts and the new territories so that local residents can enjoy some green landscape, and we support that. We support the GMPs. Now, at the moment, it's basically the LCSD, CDD, and Lands Department's job to maintain trees. Now, regarding the GMPs in Southwest and Northeast NT, would you consider setting up a group to coordinate the matters relating to tree maintenance? Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Lau. Well, tree maintenance is rather technical. The Development Bureau has sufficient work guidelines for departments to follow respectively the guidelines, and as long as they follow the guidelines, they could properly maintain the trees. There may be views from the community, from district councils, etc., on individual areas, and we're happy to collect views from them. I want to mention that after Typhoon Mangkhut in the new territories, we've seen a lot of collapsed trees. When trees get bigger, they tend to fall. That's the old saying. So the typhoon season is coming soon. Will there be sufficient manpower to trim the trees, to make them more resistant to wind? Thank you, Chairman, Deputy Chair. The answer is yes. Before the typhoon season arrives, we are already making preparation. We've completed a round of preparation. We've checked all trees and to guard against typhoon. The Tree Management Office at the moment is conducting checks again. Well, the Super Typhoon Mangkhut was very strong. Some trees might have suffered internal injuries, so to speak, that are not visible to the naked eye. But once we receive a report, we would conduct a detailed check to make sure that these trees are safe. I hope the government would pay attention to striking a balance between safety and greening. So, Deputy Chair, are you going to support this item? Yes? All right, Dr. QUAT. Thank you, Chairman. About the nitty-gritty of greening in Hong Kong. In the past few years, we have been discussing these issues in different panels. I remember that different members have staged strong views on the inadequacies and problems surrounding the government's work. Some plants and some trees in other countries have become tourist spots. For example, you have the lavender field in Hokkaido, and even in Tokyo, in a busy city center, you have the ginkgo trees, and you have so many such examples in other mainland cities as well as around the world. Whereas for Hong Kong, we have the Bohemia being the important symbol of our place. I asked this question before. Is there any street or anywhere in Hong Kong that people can enjoy the blossoming of Bohemia? It's very simple, but I've never seen the government taking any action. Now, for the greening master plans for the new territories, a number of districts are involved. Kwai Ching Tsuen Wan, Tai Po, North District. You have proposed some plant species. Just by looking at the pictures, I would say they look quite nice. The actual effect, however, is yet to be seen. After the recent super typhoon, a lot of trees collapsed and plants destroyed, so we need to be very careful in selecting the right species. So I don't know whether you have anything further to add to the GMP that you've proposed. Yes, thank you, Dr. Low, for his questions earlier. Dr. Low already reminded us that we should adopt a thematic approach in our greening effort so as to make it look nicer. Well, in fact, we have 6 GMPs exactly carrying the same objective. And that is why we have the greening themes for different areas. Apart from the GMPs, we have been asking government departments to strive to achieve greening themes. It's difficult to grow Bauhinia. It's quite fragile. It is not possible to grow Bauhinia in a crowded district. Whereas there is a sister species called Bauhinia variegata. They look similar with slight variation. They can be planted in large quantities in parks, and they're very welcome by the public. And there is also another species which looks as nice. It's called Tabibua cristanta. I'll see if Mr. Wong has anything to add. For the theme species, we have at least 3 to 4 species in each district. Deputy Secretary mentioned Bauhinia variegata and Bauhinia Blackhina and also Tabibua cristanta. These can be found in Kwai Ching, Chunwan, and Taipo. We'd like to make it pleasant looking for the public. Well, I mentioned before that it doesn't work if you have alternate planting of trees. In order to make it a tourist attraction and make it an icon, as we've seen in other places, you need to have large rows of trees of the same species. Anyway, regarding further greening in the new territories, the BPA, of course, is in support of that. I've heard members who've spoken today, and they are in unanimous support of this item being submitted to the Finance Committee. The administration has noted our indication. You'll follow up on the issues, right? I thank DS and the other government officials for coming to our meeting. We have only some 15 minutes left before we should adjourn the meeting. I need to extend the meeting by 15 minutes so that we can discuss the next item as well. If there is no objection, I will move on to the next item. That is pilot study on underground space development in selected strategic urban areas, stage 2 public engagement. I would invite Mr. Victor Chen, PAS for Development Bureau, Mr. Wallace Tang, Assistant Secretary for Development Bureau, and from the CEDD, Head of Geoengineering Office, and Deputy Commissioner of Mines, Mr. Kun Wai Keung. Also from CDD, Deputy Head of GO, Mr. Planning and Standards, Mr. Philip Chung. From the Planning Department, Chief Town Planner, Studies and Research, Mr. Lawrence Chow, to attend this item. Thank you for coming to our meeting. You have to be very brief, because we have not much time left, and our members would also like to speak to give you their comments. Our meeting will adjourn at the 45.
The Development Bureau and the CEDD will report to you on the pilot study on underground space development in selected strategic urban areas and stage 2 public engagement. And we will try to get members' views on the Kowloon Park underground space development. Now, the underground space development will resolve congestion issue. Now, in the recent report, we confirmed the advantages of underground space development. Now, the CDD and Planning Department started the study to study 4 selected areas for the overall feasibility and the potential. So we try to identify the potential sites. Now, there are 2 stages of public engagement. That the first stage ended in February 2017, and that has been completed, and we want to improve accessibility and relieve pedestrian congestion, and have more users that will facilitate the public, and views have been incorporated in a report, and that has been uploaded to the website. And we consider the views gathered in stage 1 public engagement, and for these 4 strategic areas, we consider that in Tsim Sha Tsui West there is a shortage of land for development, so we decided that priority should be given to the underground possibility of underground space under Kowloon Park. Now, as for the other strategic areas, we explored Victoria Park and Southern Playground. We found that at these 2 sites, we need to consider a number of factors. For instance, the coordination in development with the neighborhood areas in order to achieve overall synergy. At Southern Playground, we have to identify a site to reprovision the facilities because that is a matter of public concern. So we decide that these will be considered at a suitable time in the future. Now, we started the stage 2 public engagement 3 months ago. We tried to introduce the conceptual scheme for Kowloon Park, and we try to improve on the conceptual scheme. And now I invite the my colleague from CDD to introduce with the help of a PowerPoint. Now, the objective of the study is to assess the overall feasibility for 4 areas and to come up with a conceptual scheme for development. Now, in May to August this year, we will start a public engagement. Now, in stage 1 public engagement, we obtain the comments showing that about 4 topics such as the mode of construction and so on. Now, for the reasons mentioned, we recommend that underground space under Victoria Park and Southern Playground should be left to a suitable time in the future. For the Kowloon Park, we think that we aim to alleviate the congested pedestrian environment. There should be needed linking up of the community facilities, and there would be limitations such as the underground railroads in the areas. So we hope to have one site, multiple use. Secondly, we want to link to the MTR Tsim Sha Tsui station. We don't want to infringe on the areas of high ecological or heritage values. We try to reduce the impact on facilities that are used by the public to a high extent, and we try to minimize the disruption to the park and so on. So overall, we want to alleviate the congested pedestrian environment. We want to provide some parking facilities and a suitable amount of retail facilities and restaurant facilities. Now, we 40% would be community facilities, 30% would be retail and catering, and 30% would be for parking. And on the works, there would be two main points. We try to maintain the existing trees as much as possible. So the areas with the old and valuable trees, that would be ruled out. And we try to minimize the impact on park users. On the construction, we adopt the top-down technology so as to minimize the impact at ground level. And we try to adopt trenchless excavation. Now, if we do it in one go, it will take 3 to 4 years. If we do it part by part, there would be less impact, but it would take longer. It would take 6 to 7 years. Finally, after the underground works are completed, we want to take the opportunity to improve the Kowloon Park itself. We want to have more lawns, flower beds, and barrier-free access. Now, the public engagement phase 2 will start on 22nd of May. It will last 3 months. We want to brief the statutory organizations, to have roving exhibitions, and there will focus group meetings and weekend activities, and we have there also be a study website. Several members wish to speak. Gary Fan, Helena Wong, Lau Yip Keung, Michael Tian, and Wing Shun, 4 minutes each. We will end at 5:45. Now, I'd like to ask about the construction methods. Now, this says that it will this will try not to affect the cultural discoveries, heritage discovery center, and so on. And it said that there will be trenchless excavation, construction by phases. So during the construction period, will you board up part of the park, or will you board up by stages in order to engage in excavation, including trenchless excavation? If there's going to be boarding up, how about the areas and duration? The Kowloon Park is 13 hectares in area. Now, the underground space will only take up about 25% in footprint. So 75% of the park will not be affected. Now, these are mainly the Heritage Discovery Center, the old and valuable trees, the facilities like the swimming pool and the stadium, indoor stadium. Now, we'll try to avoid these locations. For the remaining 25%, the conceptual scheme provides for development by stages. Now, to excavate an underground space in the park, we need to do some work above ground, but we try to adopt techniques so that we excavate the ground to build the capping deck, so that people can use the above ground areas, and then we undertake construction beneath the capping. So we try to minimize the impact. So it's at 1/4 at the most, and it's by stages. We will sort of bore tunnels, and we need to conduct open excavation in the northern and southern parts, and the areas will be minimized. Gary Fan, any further questions? Now, the excavation in the north and south, will you park vehicles there and construction vehicles there and conduct excavation underground? Now, first, we'll build the supporting walls, and then we have put in the foundation piles, and then we adopt a top-down approach. After excavation, we'll put in a concrete capping deck, and then we build the different levels underneath. Helena Wong. Now, the scheme for underground city at Kowloon Park. Now, this will affect the residents nearby. So please talk to the residents. Now, if there can be linkage to these residential developments, it would be better. Now, there's frequent congestion at Austin Road. Now, it's been so you will now make use of the Kowloon Park carriageway there. Now, there's a lot of congestion at Austin Road. So how do you minimize the traffic impact? Now, the Yamate public car park would be demolished, and the Middle Road car park will also be demolished. So there will be a serious shortage of parking spaces. So please do try to increase as much as possible the underground parking spaces for both commercial and private vehicles to alleviate the shortage of parking spaces in the area. And you should conduct a proper traffic impact assessment to avoid congestion. Now, on the link of the underground space to West Kowloon Cultural District, you said that you would reserve the space for linkage to WKCD. So you do not have the link under the scheme as it is. So this is a failure. Now, for this underground city, this should be linked to the Shichu Center at WKCD so that the WKCD is linked up. Now, you say that there is a fire station there, so this is not feasible. Now, I counter with a proposal. You should talk to the FSD. If the fire station is moved to the underground, where the underground is, next to the police, near the police station, you would put the playground under below ground level. In that case, you can directly link the underground city to the WKCD. Now, have you been talking to the WKCDA, LCSD, and the FSD?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Wong, for her questions. In fact, Dr. Wong's observations are shared by the participants to our briefing sessions, and in fact, we have explored these issues in depth. Let me try to explain these issues. My colleagues can supplement about the link to the residential development projects. During the consultation, of course, we would liaise with local residents nearby. Is it possible to connect directly to the private premises? This touches upon the private ownership. It is not an easy task, but we will try our best in relation to this link to vicinity. About parking spaces, indeed there is room to provide parking spaces. As per the finalized proposal, parking spaces were provided close to the south, whereas for the north it should be avoided. In carrying out the study, at this stage, in the preliminary TIA, we have considered the issue. There should not be a major problem, but there will be more detailed assessment to consider the impact on traffic. Like Dr. Wong said, any development should not bring adverse impact to the existing community. We understand that. What about connection to the WKCD? Sorry, no time. Mr. Michael Tian. Thank you, Chairman. All along, I've been bringing out this message. The retail turnover has increased substantially over the past decade because of the individual tourist scheme. As a result, we have this really distorted situation. Shop space, the rent for shop space spirals such that if you want to buy a birthday card, you don't know where you can get it. You have jewelry shops and luxury goods everywhere, but not livelihood-related shops. In the long run, it is not beneficial for Hong Kong. And we suffer as well because we have fewer tourists coming under IVS. Even in Causeway Bay, many shop spaces are vacant at the moment. The same applies to Tsim Sha Tsui, and in fact, Canton Road is not well connected. There is also large shopping malls. Then the landlords would only lease the shop space to major brands. In the long run, how can we develop our own brand? So I think this Kowloon Park project is really important to Hong Kong. We have 30% parking spaces and also community facilities. Well, at the moment you have the 30% retail, beverage, entertainment mix. I agree as well. But one important point is that the government should not intervene when it comes to leasing matters. You should not engage NGO either. You should find the most competent bidder to run it. The positioning is that it should be for the purpose of promoting Hong Kong brands. It should not be skewed towards a particular sector. You should not just allow the international brands to take up all the shop space. You need to have a balance, because for Carnarvon Road and the vicinity, well, these shops are empty because it is not preferred by shoppers for lack of choices. We need to rebrand Tsim Sha Tsui as a shopping district. Nowadays, there isn't a single shopping mall in Hong Kong with the positioning of Hong Kong brand. The airport, in fact, is achieving some success. I think we should start from zero. For the existing shopping malls, definitely, they are still internationally oriented. They are not going to budge. I just want you to start this from scratch about the Hong Kong brand, and that this should be the theme for your project. Thank you, member, for your recognition of developing underground space at Kowloon Park. We agree with the member's suggestion. One important objective of developing underground space at Kowloon Park is, like the member mentioned, in some areas, the at-grade space is really crowded. We therefore would like to develop underground space so as to give more space at grade to improve the environment. And as we develop underground space, as mentioned in the paper, we are going to provide a suitable mix of retail, beverage, and F&B facilities to attract the pedestrian flow, to make it more vibrant, more attractive. I understand that you're just reciting what the government usually says. It's really vague if you want to include everything. I'm talking about promoting Hong Kong brand. Don't engage NGOs. They don't know how to run a business. You need to make the whole district vibrant. Yes, thank you, member. We understand that. We keep all options open. We'd like to receive more views so that when we finalize our plan, we can have more meaningful promotion strategy. Well, please don't tell us something about the disadvantaged shop operators, handcrafts. Please don't. It's too expensive. We should work on the principal economic activities first. Next, Mr. Vincent Chang. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the underground space development, in April, the DAB conducted an opinion poll. Close to 80% of the respondents welcomed the study, and they also find it necessary. Of course, there are also some concrete suggestions. I hope the government would follow up on these suggestions. One is on connectivity. In Tsim Sha Tsui, we have a lot of subways that are not connected. The problem is how we can connect them to the WKCD and also to Star Ferry. I hope this is not one-way street. In terms of development, you should also make sure that it is well connected to different pathways for better accessibility to different destinations. Next, I understand that some space will be allocated to NGOs. We agree because, say, for Yau Chi Mong district, it's rather trendy. Perhaps it would be an ideal place for extreme game, or the promotion of sports by NGOs. And underneath this mosque, we also have development. At the moment, the place is really crowded, so you may consider using that space for development as well, taking this opportunity. The other point is about retailers. In Yau Chi Mong, we already have a lot of luxury and brands. I think residents would like to have shops of more distinct characteristics in the long term. Well, for the underground space, it is not very large. Some residents have pointed out that the government should consider the swimming pool area as well. It is not covered by this study because of the design constraints, etc. I wonder if there is room to consider that as well. For example, you can do it in phases during winter so that you can carry out works regarding the pool and release more underground space. Any response? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chang, for your recognition of this scheme. Let me respond to the point about connectivity. And let me just also respond to Dr. Helena Wong's suggestion for connecting this to WKCD. In stage 1 public engagement, there is an expression of interest. That is to say, it would be much desired if we could connect the underground space to Xixu Center or underground or WKCD. Well, in the process, I think the member is also well aware of the existing facilities present, such as the fire station. So reprovisioning is a major consideration. It's not just about considering the space. The CEDD, together with the FST and other departments, have been liaising on the matter. It's about dispatch of how fire engines are dispatched, whether the fire engines can access different areas in a short period of time. This is also our consideration. We are working with the relevant departments and exploring the feasibility. Like Mr. Chang said, however, our objective is strive to develop the underground space for connecting to the vicinity areas. Next, Mr. Ray Chan. Last month, in the executive summary of the Stage 2P exercise, paragraph 30, in relation to the Victoria Park underground space proposal, we at the moment do not recommend developing underground space of Victoria Park. Nevertheless, when there are development projects nearby, we will once again, in the future, we will review the opportunity so that we can have a comprehensive integration of the underground space. In other words, they haven't explained why they are not going ahead with Victoria Park. They just used vague words such as creating synergy and the vicinity. Well, for Southern Playground, there is another reason. The reason is that if you develop underground space, it would affect the at-grade use of the facilities. So the option will only be considered when reprovisioning is possible. The Victoria Park is an important venue for large public order events. In fact, in June, together with the June 4th Vigil, we have had 3 major assemblies with over 1 million participants. I'm concerned whether if we develop the park, it will be possible to accommodate further large gatherings. Can you explain more clearly why this option will not proceed, and also about roughly when will you revisit the opportunity of developing underground space at Victoria Park? Because at the moment, if you don't go ahead with it, does it mean that it will be shelved, just like the current term government's rhetoric? Thank you for the question. I think that you have touched on an issue. In different areas, we have come up with different strategies. Why is it that the pace of development is different? It relates to the vicinity. Well, we emphasize that when we develop underground space, it's not just about creating space. We want to create synergy. In other words, we'd like the development to tie in with surrounding developments. For Kowloon Park, as we mentioned, we have rather mature projects in the vicinity. For the Victoria Park, perhaps the CEDD can elaborate on the point. Please allow me to finish some housekeeping matters. We're about to adjourn the meeting. We have one member who has pressed the button as well. I need to further extend the meeting to after Dr. Low has finished asking his question. That is 4 minutes, if there is no objection. So would your colleague please answer Mr. Ray Chan's question? Will be succinct. To tie in with development, this is about the RDS 2014. In fact, the North Island line is in the pipeline. We don't know the details yet. We have no idea where the station will be, so we need to finalize the development details of the railway line, whether it will be close to the Victoria Park development area. By then, we can holistically consider the proposal.
So, if there can be a wider linkage, it would be better, but they do not have a timetable yet. Now, if there is going to be development at Victoria Park, will it affect the use of the great space, and will it limit the number of people there? As in the case of Kowloon Park, we will consider the impact on the park itself. We will try to minimize the impact. Next, Low White Cock. Now, on how to make the best use of land in Hong Kong for various uses. Now, we've been talking on that. Studies on urban space have been done several times. There was territory-wide study, and then there were 4 locations that were subjected to further study, and now we have a more comprehensive scheme on a chosen area for second phase public engagement. Now this is current day Hong Kong, so the pace is slow. But Hong Kong people have a lot of experience on the use of underground space. Now, in many tourist destinations around the world, they have underground shopping areas, underground cities and streets. So they have done so well, but Hong Kong has been lagging behind. So we now at least have one chosen location where the underground space development might be implemented. Now, I hope that phase 2 public engagement will garner more public support. I and my party are very supportive. Now, for the other 3 areas, now there is no very no concrete roadmap for those 3 locations. Now there has to be dovetailing with other developments, so we hope that will eventually materialize. Now, recently there were several large major government facilities, government office blocks. Now, we asked why for those buildings we couldn't have more underground parking spaces on more than one level. Now, for the reprovisioning of the Wan Chai office towers, we've been talking about that problem. Now, even for government vehicles, there's a shortage of government space, of parking space underground. There can be a more aggressive use of underground space. Now, for the other 3 strategic areas, have there been any plans yet? We thank the member for his support. Now, for the 4 strategic areas, we are suggesting early development of the Tsim Sha Tsui West. Now, for Southern Playground and Causeway Bay, now we established the technical feasibility, but timing is the issue. We will continue to explore that. The other strategic area is Happy Valley. Now, the study revealed that currently there are some underground facilities in use. There are some large-scale drainage systems underground. So that has limited the space for underground development. So we have completed our agenda, and we thank the administration for their attendance, and we have heard the views of members. And then now AOB, no AOB, the meeting comes to an end. Thank you.